The first message was not written for anyone to understand. It appeared at 2:17 a.m. on a private forum buried several layers beneath the surface web. No username. No timestamp that matched any known server clock. Just a black screen with a single red sentence. Do not enter if you value what watches you when you sleep. Most users assumed it was another attempt at shock content, the kind that circulates through hidden networks to bait curiosity. Still, within minutes, screenshots began spreading. Not because of the warning, but because of what followed. A link. It wasn't formatted like a normal URL. There were no recognizable domains, no routing identifiers. Just a string of characters that seemed to rearrange themselves depending on how long you stared at it. Several users later claimed the link changed each time they refreshed the page. Others insisted it stayed exactly the same, but only for them. One user, posting under the alias Karev, was the first to say he accessed it. According to archived logs, Karev had a history of exploring restricted networks. He documented his findings with unusual precision, often recording timestamps down to the second. His posts were calm, technical, and rarely exaggerated. At 2:23 a.m., he wrote, "I'm inside. It's not loading like a normal site." No one responded immediately. The forum had gone unusually quiet, the kind of silence that sometimes follows when something crosses an invisible boundary. At 2:25 a.m., Karev posted again. There's no interface, no text, just a room. He stopped responding for nearly 4 minutes. When he returned, his tone had changed. "I don't think this is a stream." That was the first moment the thread began to draw attention. Because on the dark web, a red room has a specific meaning. It refers to a live broadcast, usually involving violence, where viewers can pay to influence what happens on screen. Most of these are myths or scams. No verified case has ever been proven real. But Karev insisted this was different. "There's no camera movement," he wrote. "No compression artifacts. No buffering. It's like I'm looking through something, not at a screen." Other users began asking questions. Some demanded proof. Others warned him to disconnect. At 2:31 a.m., he shared his first description. The room is small. Concrete walls. No doors visible. There's a chair in the center. Metal. Bolted to the floor.
He paused again.
There's something wrong with the lighting. Someone asked what he meant. Karev responded almost immediately. It's not casting shadows correctly. That detail would later appear in multiple independent accounts. The light in the room, if it could be called light, seemed to exist without a source. It illuminated objects, but inconsistently. Shadows stretched in directions that didn't match any fixed point. At times, they appeared to move slightly, even when nothing else did. At 2:34 a.m., Karev typed, "I think there's someone in the chair." The thread became active again. Dozens of users joined, scrolling through the earlier messages, trying to piece together what he was seeing.
"Can you zoom?" one asked.
"There's no controls," Karev replied. "No UI. Just the room." Another user asked if the person was alive. Karev didn't answer right away. Then, slowly, "I don't think it's a person." That was when the first user left the thread. There was no announcement. No message. Their account simply disconnected. Moments later, another followed. Then another. By 2:38 a.m., only a handful of users remained. Karev continued. "It's shaped like a person. Sitting upright. Head tilted forward. But it's too still." Someone suggested it might be a mannequin. Karev responded, "If it is, it's breathing wrong." The phrase didn't make sense to most readers. But Karev didn't clarify. At 2:40 a.m., he posted something that would later be referenced in multiple investigations. "It just looked at me." The forum froze again. "How?" someone typed. "There's no camera. It can't see you." Karev's response came in fragments, as if he were typing while trying not to move. "I didn't move. I didn't click anything. But it lifted its head. Slowly. And it's facing directly forward now." Another user asked if there were any identifying features. Karev hesitated. Then, "There's no face." Several users left immediately after that message. The remaining ones urged him to disconnect. "Close the browser. Shut down the system. Karev didn't respond. At 2:43 a.m., his typing resumed. The room is changing. No one understood what he meant. The walls are closer. Someone accused him of fabricating the experience. Karev replied with a single line. I can hear something now. That was the first mention of audio. Until then, the room had been completely silent. What does it sound like? Someone asked. Karev's response took longer this time. When it came, it was brief. Not from the room. Another pause. It's behind me. The thread remained active, but no one spoke. At 2:46 a.m., Karev posted his final coherent message. I didn't give it permission to see me. After that, his typing became erratic. Letters appeared out of order. Words overlapped. Sentences broke apart before they could be completed. It looked less like someone panicking and more like someone struggling to maintain control over their own input. Then, at 2:49 a.m., the thread ended. Not because Karev disconnected, because the forum itself went offline. According to server logs recovered later, the shutdown wasn't triggered by an administrator. It wasn't a crash either. The system simply stopped responding to all incoming and outgoing requests simultaneously. When it came back online nearly 3 hours later, the thread was gone. Karev's account had been erased. No archive, no backup, no trace, except for one thing. A single user, operating under the alias Marek, had captured a partial screen recording before the shutdown. He didn't share it publicly at first. Instead, he contacted a small group of individuals who specialized in analyzing anomalous digital behavior. Among them was a systems engineer named Daniel Haas. According to Haas's personal notes, Marek's recording did not behave like a normal video file. It doesn't have a stable frame rate, he wrote. Frames repeat inconsistently. Some appear out of sequence. Others don't belong to the same visual space. Haas attempted to isolate individual frames. What he found disturbed him enough to document the process in detail. In several frames, the geometry of the room changes. Not gradually. Instantly. The walls shift position between frames without any transitional movement. The chair remains fixed, but everything else reorients around it. He also noted something else. In at least 4 frames, there is a second shape present, not visible in the preceding or following frames. It does not match the proportions of the seated figure. When asked to describe it, Haas wrote, It's standing behind the chair, but the angle is wrong. It's not aligned with the room. Marek eventually released a heavily compressed version of the recording to a private channel. Most who viewed it dismissed it as corrupted data, but a few recognized something deeper. Something that didn't behave like digital noise. Because the anomalies in the footage followed a pattern. And patterns in systems like this usually mean intent. Within days, similar reports began to surface. Users from different regions on different networks claimed to have encountered the same link. Not by searching for it, but by finding it embedded in unrelated pages. Hidden inside image files. Buried in lines of code that didn't execute anything visible. Each time, the warning appeared first. Do not enter if you value what watches you when you sleep. Most ignored it. Some didn't. Those who clicked described the same room, the same chair, the same figure. But not all of them saw it the same way. One user claimed the figure was already standing when the page loaded. Another said the room was empty at first, and the figure appeared only after several minutes. A third insisted there were multiple figures, each occupying a different corner of the room, though only one could be seen at a time. Despite the variations, one detail remained consistent across all accounts. At some point during the session, the figure, or whatever it was, would turn. And when it did, the viewer would feel something behind them. Not a sound, not a movement, just the unmistakable awareness of being observed from outside the screen. Medical explanations were proposed. Sleep deprivation, suggestibility, shared hallucination. But those theories began to weaken when physical symptoms were reported. Users described pressure at the back of the head, sudden drops in temperature within the room they were sitting in, electronic interference affecting nearby devices. In one documented case, a user's webcam activated without permission during the session. The recording, later recovered, showed nothing unusual on screen. But the user's reflection, visible in a dark portion of the monitor, appeared to shift independently of their movement. The incident was dismissed as a glitch, until similar reports emerged. Within 2 weeks, the link had spread far enough to attract the attention of individuals outside the usual dark web communities. Among them was a small research group affiliated with a European institute studying digital cognition and anomalous perception. They approached the phenomenon cautiously, not as a supernatural event, but as a potential interaction between human perception and an unknown form of data structure. Their lead investigator, Dr. Elias Vorn, documented the first controlled access attempt. According to his report, the link did not behave consistently. It is not resolved through standard routing protocols, he wrote. It appears to bypass conventional addressing systems entirely. Access is not determined by location, but bioselection. The wording was deliberate, because in multiple tests, the link would fail to load on some systems while appearing instantly on others, even when using identical configurations. Dr. Vorn was among the few who successfully accessed it. His description matched the earlier accounts. The room,
The chair.
the figure. But his observations went further. The environment does not respond to input, he noted. There are no interactive elements. However, the perception of the environment changes based on duration of exposure. He remained connected for 11 minutes. At the 9-minute mark, he recorded a shift. The figure begins to exhibit nonlinear movement. It does not transition between positions. It occupies different positions between visual intervals. Then, at 10 minutes and 32 seconds, it is no longer in the chair. The report ends abruptly after that line. Dr. Vorn did not submit any further documentation. His colleagues later stated that he refused to discuss the session in detail. He insisted that the phenomenon was not a broadcast, and not a simulation. It's not showing us something, he told them. It's letting something see us. 3 days later, Dr. Vorn requested that all research related to the link be terminated. His request was denied. The project continued without him. But within a week, 2 additional researchers withdrew from the study. Both cited similar reasons. Unexplained disturbances. Not during the sessions, but afterward. One of them, in a private statement, wrote, "It doesn't stay on the screen." The implications of that statement were not immediately understood until the first physical incident was reported. A user in northern Germany was found unresponsive in his apartment. No signs of forced entry. No indication of struggle. His computer was still running. The browser window was open, displaying a black screen. No room. No chair. No figure. Just a single line of red text. "You looked too long." Authorities ruled the case as an unexplained medical event. But those who had seen the link recognized the message. It had never appeared before. Not to any of the users who accessed it. Which meant one thing. The message wasn't part of the site. It was a response. And it was learning. The next time the link appeared, the warning had changed.
Slightly.
Almost imperceptibly. But enough for those paying attention to notice. "Do not enter if you value what watches you when you sleep." Had become, "Do not enter if you value what now knows where you sleep." The difference was subtle, but it suggested progression, awareness, adaptation, and something else, something far more difficult to explain. Because in several reported cases, users who had never encountered the link before began to describe dreams. Identical in structure. They all found themselves in a room. Concrete walls. No doors. A chair in the center. And something sitting in it. Waiting. Not moving. Until they realized they weren't outside the room anymore. They were inside it. And the thing in the chair was beginning to stand. The first documented dream was dismissed as coincidence. It came from a university student in Prague who had no known connection to the forum where the link originally appeared. According to his roommate, the student woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m., sat upright in bed, and began describing a room he had never seen before. Concrete walls. No windows. No visible door. A metal chair in the center. He spoke calmly at first, as if recalling a place he had visited many times. Then his voice changed. Lower. Slower. He said the chair was empty when he entered, but he knew something had been sitting there, because the metal was still warm. The roommate later reported that the student reached out into the air, as if touching something invisible. His fingers stopped mid-motion, hovering inches away from nothing. Then he whispered, "It's standing behind me now." He did not turn around. He stayed like that for nearly 30 seconds, completely still, breathing shallow and uneven. When the roommate tried to shake him, the student collapsed back onto the bed, unconscious. He had no memory of the event the next morning, but that was only the beginning. Within days, similar reports began to surface across different regions. Individuals with no shared networks, no common online behavior, and no known exposure to the link were describing the same dream. Always the same room, always the same chair, and always the same sequence. They would enter. They would notice the emptiness. And then, gradually, they would become aware of something behind them. Not through sound, not through movement, but through a presence that felt deliberate, focused, waiting. Medical professionals initially classified these cases as a form of induced sleep paralysis or stress-related hallucination. A few suggested the possibility of a viral narrative spreading unconsciously through fragmented online exposure. But that theory began to collapse when patients started reporting physical sensations that extended beyond the dream state. Pressure marks. Localized bruising. In one case, a faint imprint on the back of the neck, resembling the outline of fingers, too long, too narrow, and spaced in a way that did not match human anatomy. Photographs were taken, analyzed, then quietly archived, because no one could explain how a dream could leave a mark. Around this time, the research group led by Dr. Elias Vorn resumed their investigation under restricted conditions. Access to the link was limited to a controlled environment. Sessions were monitored, recorded, and timed precisely. They implemented a strict protocol. No session would exceed 8 minutes. No participant would be alone. And no one would return for a second viewing. The first subject was a technician named Lucas Wren. He had no prior knowledge of the phenomenon beyond basic instructions. He was told to observe, report, and disconnect at the 8-minute mark. The session began at 11:04 p.m. For the first 3 minutes, nothing unusual occurred. Wren described the room exactly as others had. Concrete walls.
The chair.
The figure. Seated, motionless. At 4 minutes, he noted a visual distortion. "The edges of the room feel unstable," he said. "Like they're not fixed." At 5 minutes, his breathing changed. Slower. More deliberate. As if he were trying not to make noise. At 6 minutes, he stopped speaking entirely. The supervising staff prompted him twice. No response. At 7 minutes and 20 seconds, he whispered, "It's not in the chair anymore." The team prepared to terminate the session. But before they could act, Wren spoke again. "It's closer." There was no visible change on the screen. The recording showed the same static room, the same chair, empty. At 7 minutes and 48 seconds, Wren turned his head slightly to the left. Not toward the screen, but toward the space beside him. His eyes focused on something that wasn't there. Then he smiled. Not out of relief, not out of recognition, but in a way that suggested understanding. As if something had just confirmed a thought he hadn't spoken aloud. The session was terminated immediately. Wren lost consciousness seconds later. He was transported to a medical facility and remained unresponsive for nearly 14 hours. When he regained consciousness, he refused to describe what he had seen. He insisted that the session had continued after the screen went black. That wasn't the end, he told them. That was when it started. He was removed from the program the following day. 2 nights later, security footage from his apartment captured something unusual. At 2:17 a.m., Wren exited his bedroom and walked into the living room. He did not turn on the lights. He did not appear disoriented. He moved with purpose. He stopped in the center of the room. Then, he pulled a chair from the dining table and placed it directly in front of him, facing nothing. He stood there for several seconds. Then, slowly, he sat down and remained completely still for over 2 hours. At 4:29 a.m., the footage shows him stand up again, but not in the way one normally would. There was no shift in posture, no visible transition. In one frame, he is seated. In the next, he is standing. The frames between those positions are missing, corrupted, or possibly never recorded. Ren returned to his bedroom and lay down. He did not wake up the next morning. The official report listed cardiac arrest as the cause of death, but the attending physician included an additional note. Unusual muscular rigidity observed post-mortem. Limbs fixed in a seated posture despite supine position. The note was not included in the final documentation. It was removed before the report was archived. By this point, the research group had begun to reconsider their approach. What they were dealing with did not behave like a typical digital anomaly. It did not follow predictable patterns. It did not remain confined to the system through which it was accessed. And most concerning of all, it appeared to persist beyond the point of interaction. Dr. Vorn, who had previously withdrawn from the project, was contacted again. He agreed to a single meeting. According to those present, he appeared physically unchanged. But his behavior had shifted. He avoided direct eye contact. He spoke in short, measured sentences. And he refused to enter any room that did not have more than one visible exit. When asked to explain his earlier statement that the phenomenon was letting something see us, he responded with a question. What do you think a room is? No one answered. He continued. A room is a boundary, a defined space, something with limits. He paused. That thing doesn't have limits. It uses the idea of a room because we understand it, because it's the simplest way to contain something that isn't meant to be contained. One of the researchers asked if it was intelligent. Dr. Vorn shook his head. Not in the way we define intelligence. Then what is it? Someone asked. He took a long time before answering. It's a direction. The room fell silent. A direction to where? Another researcher asked. Vorn looked at him. Then, quietly, to something that has been trying to find us. He refused to elaborate further. The meeting ended shortly after. Within 48 hours, all remaining sessions were suspended. The link was no longer accessed under any official capacity, but it didn't disappear. If anything, it became more active. Reports increased, not just of the room, but of something else. Something that hadn't been present before. Users began to describe a second presence within the environment. Not the figure in the chair, but something beyond it. Something that did not appear directly, but could be inferred. In the way the room reacted, in the way the figure moved. As if the seated entity was not the source, but a reflection, or a signal. In one account, a user described the moment the figure stood up. He claimed it did not move toward him. Instead, it stepped aside, as if making space for something else to enter. The user disconnected immediately, but the description was enough to raise new concerns, because it suggested the figure was not the endpoint. It was an intermediary, a threshold. And if that was true, then the room itself was not the destination. It was a gateway. The final incident before the case was unofficially sealed occurred in a small town in southern France. A family of 3 reported repeated disturbances over the course of several nights. Objects moving slightly out of place, unexplained sounds in empty rooms, and a persistent feeling of being watched, especially in areas of the house where no reflective surfaces were present. The father, who had a background in network security, eventually traced the issue to a dormant process running on their home computer. There was no visible application, no active window, but the system logs showed intermittent activity at precise intervals. Every night, at 2:17 a.m., he attempted to isolate the process,
Terminate it.
remove it entirely, but each time he did, it reappeared, not as a file, but as a state. As if the system itself had been altered to accommodate it. On the 4th night, he decided to observe it directly. He set up a camera in the living room, positioned it to capture both the computer screen and the surrounding space. Then he waited. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the screen activated. No input, no command, just a sudden shift from black to red. The same message appeared, but it was no longer centered. It was distorted, stretched across the screen as if it were trying to escape its own boundaries. The man approached cautiously. The camera captured everything. his hesitation, his breathing. The moment he reached for the keyboard, Anne stopped, because something behind him moved, not visibly, but enough to register. A slight change in the air, a displacement, the kind that doesn't produce sound, but alters perception. He didn't turn around. He remained still, staring at the screen. Then slowly the text changed, not all at once, but letter by letter, until it formed a new sentence, one that had never been recorded before. You opened the door. The man stepped back. The camera captured his reflection in the screen, and for a single frame, just one, there was something else standing behind him, not aligned with the room, not bound by its dimensions, but present, watching. The footage ends abruptly after that frame. The camera did not shut off. It continued recording, but every frame after that point was completely black. No data, no signal, as if something had passed between the lens and the world itself.